I think sometimes out of the worst of situations become sometimes your best stuff. And that's kind of linking it back to kind of why I do what I do, is because, okay, yeah, I struggled and I was really low and I'd never want anyone to go through it, absolutely not. But I don't think if I hadn't gone through what I did, I'd be doing what I do now.
Hello and welcome to the Menfulness Podcast. It's me, Sam Watling. Thank you once again for gracing us with your time and attention as we try to create a place where it's all right to feel whatever it is that you're feeling right now. It's completely normal to be anxious. It's normal to be depressed. It's normal to feel not normal sometimes. And the more we tell each other about this, the more we might realise that it's normal together. So, in Menfulness news, Menfulness 2.0 is ramping up. If you haven't heard, this is a research project that we're doing in partnership with the York St John University. Jack and I have been meeting with lead researcher Gary Shepherd, and we now have a research assistant, Holly, who's been employed until next summer, who will be working on the complete evaluation of our charity. We know that it's working, and we can see that people benefit from it, but we want to know how, and hopefully even why. So we will bring you more on that soon as we get it. We also have some feedback from Leela about Leo's podcast. This says, I think these podcasts are bloody brilliant. The guests always sound so comfortable and embraced, and it's always so warm and positive and deep. That one from Leo really is brilliant, isn't it? The way he talks about everything is so calm and chilled. I love the way he speaks and the words that he uses. It really is magnificent, so thank you for doing them. Thank you, Leela. It's an absolute pleasure. It's an honour. The fact people keep wanting to come on and do these conversations just blows me away. We've already recorded 2 or 3 that are waiting to be edited that are amazing, including today's podcast with Chris Klays. And I love it. And everybody who's been on so far has said that they have felt like it's a cathartic experience for them. And so perhaps you've got a message. Perhaps you've got a story that you want to tell. And if you do, I would love to hear it. So you can get in touch via menfulness.org, look for podcast page, and you can apply to come on here then. I would love to hear from you. Get in touch. Have you got your merch yet? Get to menfulness.org, click merchandise in the drop down, and pick up a woolly hat ready for winter. We've also got t-shirts, hoodies, joggers, all sorts on there. So please do check it out. You can still get free shipping with the promo code FREESHIPCHEMISTRY. That's all one word, capital letters, Free Ship Chemistry. It's for a limited time, so do get on there. Why not get you some Christmas presents in early, eh? Now, it's time to hear from Chris Klays. Chris is a systems change lead for the incredible mental health charity York Mind. Chris talks to us about his Chit podcast, why pigeons and jam can both be good for your mental health, and how his role involves working with young people to figure out how they want to look after their mental well-being. He's also been good enough to gift us with a bit about the challenges he's faced with his own mental health and how that's helped shape the work that he does today. We talk about mental health in the workplace, things we might do to stay well, and what it was like interviewing his mum on his own podcast. It was lovely to speak to Chris, so a big thank you to him and to Mind for all the amazing work that they do helping people. So please do go and check out the Chit podcast after this episode, and I've put links in the description for how you can engage with more of the content from York Mind. As always, we get right into it in this conversation, and we do touch on a few triggering topics such as depression, anxiety, suicide, but hopefully you'll agree that it is a positive conversation with some real insight. After this episode, please do let us know what you think. Give us a like, share, or subscribe to us. The more you engage with our content, the more you can help us grow and reach new people who might just need to hear it. All right, thank you very much for listening. Enjoy this conversation. Here he is. It's Chris Klays. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for being here, mate.
Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
How am I today?
Shall we have a check-in? I noticed at the start of your podcasts we do a bit of a check-in before you get going, don't you?
Aye. So. How am I today? Well, I went to Go Ape yesterday. Me and my girlfriend went and we were like, let's just be 12-year-olds again and go climb up some trees for a bit. How am I today? I'm all right. I feel like I'm spinning a few plates at the moment.
Yeah.
Which is natural at times for being an adult. It happens. But no, I'm all right actually today. It feels weird actually podcasting because it's like 7:30 now. I'm usually doing this in the morning, and so
I can't imagine doing it in the morning. I don't think I would have woken up enough yet to have the sort of conversations you do at that time.
Do you do all of them?
Pretty much all of them at this time.
Fair.
Usually on a Monday as well, which is probably not the best day to do it. Because I'm exhausted too. I feel the same way, mate. Spinning a few plates, feeling a little overwhelmed, and then thinking, right, I've got to show up because Chris is coming and it's podcast time and he's a podcaster. But the reality is that,
loose.
but it's good. It's kind of good to just to sort of tell people what the check-in is. Like at the start of all yours, you give people a chance to kind of shake it off a bit, don't you?
Yeah, so the idea of the check-in is we kind of do it in we try and do it in all aspects of kind of mind and your mind and stuff. Is so start of meetings, start of workshops, basically anywhere where someone might be feeling a bit like anxious or nervous about, what am I about to say? It's kind of to hear your voice in the room and almost leave some of the anxieties at the door. So we're like, why don't we just bring it into the podcast? Because if people are about to talk about things that are quite close to them or particularly around their mental health, then let's do it there. Let's try and put people as easy as possible when they're talking about things that of a nature that quite can be sensitive.
Yeah, and it, like you say, it leaves it at the door a little bit so that you can then that's sorted. Let's talk about what we came here to talk about.
And I think it's important as well with check-ins. It's like sometimes with the check-ins, you can do a check-in at the beginning, but also we can do them throughout.
Yeah,
it's also sometimes coming back to it if you have touched on something that's sensitive to someone or maybe trigger it. It's like, do you want to check in? How are you doing?
That's interesting.
And it's how do we continue to do that in kind of all aspects of life? I guess
that's awesome, man. Yeah, I've noticed that with some of our group sessions, there's a collective emotional hangover. Sometimes after them, people will talk in the WhatsApp group the day after, like, wow, that was an amazing night, but I'm feeling it now, having shared a little bit. So I think that's really interesting that it runs throughout.
I found that when I ever went to like counselling and stuff, that how I used to be so tired after any support I ever got, whether that be counselling or whatever, and I used to be like, oh, my brain just kind of like almost relief, but also like I'm so tired.
Yeah, emotional fatigue a little bit.
Yeah, and especially I think if you don't do things like check-ins, you might go, how often do we worry about what we said? How did we say it?
Oh God, yeah,
it's a daily basis for me.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why I prefer being on this side of the microphone. I don't know how you are. We'll get to that. But just for the benefit of the audience, we connected over, I guess, podcasting. But so you advocate for speaking out about mental health generally. And when we'd started to do this podcast, I'd looked for what else was out there and locally what was going on. And you guys you were 2 or 3 months in, I think, but going strong. And it seems to have just got bigger and bigger from there. So I'm interested to hear all about the podcast as well as your mind and what you do as well. I know podcast isn't the only bit that you do there. So any background about you? What's your story, age, name, where you from?
So this is quite funny because last night I was at a bit of a leaving do for a friend, and I didn't know many people here, and somebody asked me, it's like, go on Chris, what's your story? I was like, how much do you want to know? I was like,
how long have you got?
And I ended up giving them 2 scenarios. I was like, right, I'm going to give you 2 and you've got to guess the right one. We may have
You had a fake scenario ready to go.
No, I just used one of my mate's stories. I basically just used one of my mates who I played cricket with. I was like, go on, guess who I am. So I was either a chemist that now works for an insurance firm, or I was my real self. But I'll go with my real self.
Did they get it right?
Well, they started asking me what was the chemical formula for methane.
They had you, didn't they?
And I was like, oh, crap, I can't do that. No, they did get it right. Anyway, I digress. I'm Chris, I'm 25. I work for York Mind, from York, still live in York, work in York, went to university in Sheffield, did politics at Sheffield, and if I'm honest, I've always kind of wanted to work in charity sector, or politics, which is a tricky subject at the moment we're in the world. But it kind of I've always wanted to do something where either there's a bit of purpose, there's something substantial. It feels like I've done bar work and I've worked in supermarkets. I've done it, but it doesn't quite pull me in.
Impacting people's lives, I suppose.
I think both selfishly and selfishly, if that makes sense. So like, it benefits me to be able to try and help people. So, and if I can help people, amazing. But also it benefits myself by being able to think, actually, what did I do today? Did I sell this many things to the Eskimos? Or did I... But actually, if I can say that on the day, I've helped this many people, or someone's listened to the podcast and someone might have benefited from that, then that could be a good day.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, there's definitely an inner hug from doing something for someone else that I think is underrated a little bit. But to do something that gives you that and it be your job must be a really rewarding place to be. And Mind, the biggest mental health charity in the country, the work that they do, the impact they have. But Mind in York has got quite a prevalent place. I don't know whether that's the same across the country, but certainly in York, you guys seem to be everywhere.
It's a weird one, but I think because Mind and York Mind are like separate in some respects. So like Mind do all the big national campaigns, and then like the local charities themselves, like York Mind, whether it be Leeds Mind, Scarborough, whatever, they do a lot of the kind of like the one-to-one work, and then the things that are more focused on the areas and stuff. I love my job and I love working for York Mind. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have 15 people helping me doing my job and stuff, but who can't say they wouldn't like a little bit more help with their job? So
no, that's really good to hear, mate. That's awesome. And obviously the main reason you're here is the podcast. That's the bit of your job that I've heard the most. So tell us a little bit about the podcast. Where did it start? What's it called? What do you do on there?
Right, I'm the host of the podcast and do the bits around and do the work of it. But the idea of so it's called Chit, and the whole idea of it came out of a project which we were doing at York Mind, and it started about 18 months ago or so, where we wanted to ask young people what would they change about the system, what would they like to have done differently in mental health that affects them. And what stood out in a lot of the workshops is that young people wanted to hear both different perspectives of people's mental health journeys and understand where and which kind of how people manage or where they've gone. But they were quite frustrated with the fact that all that you hear on the news is NHS in crisis, waiting times massive. And they were like, we want to hear about the positive sides, like who's come through it, like how do they manage. And so the whole point of the podcast is to kind of go, right, what's your story, we want to know it, but also how do you manage, how do you get through. And if that can benefit one person, or if one person can resonate with that, then ace.
Yeah, and I think it looks like it has. I saw your roundup. You're a year old. Happy birthday! Congratulations.
By what is it? I stole Spotify Wrapped. The idea of it.
Did you put that video together as well? Are you doing all the socials and stuff around it? Do you? Right. Okay. That's a lot, man. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Well, so
Canva is a good friend of mine.
Yeah, mine too. So 34 episodes, 43 people.
Yeah.
31 countries. I mean, that's impressive, man.
I'm just trying to work out when I see
Latvia.
When I look on the statistics on different stuff, I'm like, who is in South Africa that I know?
And I wish I could contact them.
Like, who is it? Who is this? Yeah. There's one person I know who it. I don't know who it is, but they download the podcast literally in the first 6 hours every single time one gets released, and they're in New York, and I'm like, they're the first person. I was like, who are you? I don't know who you are.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. You've got some, across the globe.
No, it is, and it's a bit bizarre because people. Do you find it as well that you like people like turning on to listen to me talk to somebody else?
I think because of the imposter syndrome. I think when it started, it was like this. I've always wanted to do something, and I think when I've been the main focus of the thing, I've struggled a little bit to actually be authentic and be present. Whereas with this, I can be the person putting someone else on a platform, that felt more comfortable. But when I first put it out, it was like, oh, is anybody listening? And seeing that go up, seeing the numbers go up is strange. But it I suppose once you've got into the flow of it and people are listening, you not only will you get repeat audio, can you find out whether the same people are listening?
No,
we can't either.
So I don't really understand.
No.
I understand the statistics to a
degree.
To a degree, but I don't really understand them that
No,
well.
because to get to other countries, you would imagine that's got to be word of mouth or social media, hasn't it?
Yeah, who knows? Well, I can't imagine they're going on Your Mind and go to
Exactly,
a York-based
That's
website.
amazing, yeah. New York, maybe they've gone for like help in New York, and they've come out with York Help.
They've got a little stick here now.
Yeah, exactly, man. But this is the beauty of it: is the stories are real wherever you're listening from.
Absolutely.
So actually, people that aren't just in York get to benefit from that, and you focus on all sorts of different subjects. Like pretty much, I mean, you've got 34 episodes, but stuff from eating disorders, OCD, anxiety, ADHD, coping mechanisms, exam stress. There's there's all sorts.
Yeah, so based on kind of what the young people said in all these workshops and stuff, I've really got to say it's come straight out of the mouths of babes as such, and say it is completely from young people. They wanted to hear different stories, different conditions, different ways people manage, because in part of my job, I go into assemblies and promote it and say this is beneficial to you, or it might be beneficial to you. And if you can do as I say at the end of each assemblies, if you take 1% of Your Mind or 1% of Chit, and that's the thing that benefits you, then that's great, because we are unique, we are all different, and that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So that I'm not saying go rinse every single episode, but there might be ones that might be more applicable to you, and you go, oh, okay, that makes a little bit more sense to me.
Yeah, or you might know someone who's struggling with something and think, actually, I could listen to that and maybe get an insight on how they might be feeling.
Absolutely, especially when you're trying to help people, or support someone else. I've supported somebody else. It's so hard. Yeah, you just want to make it stop, don't you?
Yeah, of course you do.
And sometimes hearing that perspective, because it isn't just people's stories who've struggled, but also different perspectives. So we've had someone from CAMS who talked about their work. My dear mother was on the podcast.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that, actually. Yeah, that's amazing that she was up for it, and that it's like, how do you have a conversation like that publicly?
How do you have a conversation?
It's a big conversation, but a lovely one as well, and an honest one. And I think, if people have got kids and are thinking, where do I start? How do I be honest and present and vulnerable, and let them be who they are? Because you wrapped up with all that. I want to protect them. I want to make things okay. I think you both did an amazing job with it.
Well, you listened to that episode, and at the start of it, I start speaking about myself in third person. I'm like, so how was it when Chris started to struggle? I'm like, oh no,
because you're such a pro. You just slipped into podcast mode and just forgot that you were you.
No, I'm Chris. Go back to it. I think what scared me the most was the 3 sheets of notes that she had in front of me. And I was like, hang about, mother.
She was taking it seriously, which is lovely.
No, she's an absolute worldie. She's amazing. And I was so thankful thankful for supporting me in all of it, but also thankful for coming on, because we've got one coming out in a couple of weeks, actually, who's another parent of another person who's been on the podcast.
Right.
Just trying to, like you said, trying to create a bit of a bank of these stories that might benefit people, because we understand things in different ways, and that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you, mate. And I wonder, you're very generous with your story not obviously in that episode, but generally you seem very open, and I wonder how much that helps you do what you do, and whether that's part of the reason that you do what you do, and if you're happy to share a little bit about your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do it enough on the podcast anyway. I try my hardest not to at times. I'm like, no, that makes so much sense to me. I'm like, no, Chris, this is somebody else's story.
I'm with you, man. I'm the same. It's an enthusiasticness, but then suddenly you're like, for me, because we're long form as well, I'll be like, oh shit, I've been talking about myself for 20 minutes now. Back to you.
Honestly, the most edited. So when people come on the podcast, they're like, oh, after an hour and 15, I don't know, it's like, how much are you going to have to edit? I was like, probably about a minute of you, probably about 25 minutes of me, because I was just chatting utter drivel. Sorry, I digress. No, my story is very much, it has massive, so the work I do now, so in quotation marks, systems change lead at York Mind, whatever
Right,
that
that's
means.
your job title, is it?
Yeah,
Right.
whatever that means. But basically, I work in young people services and try and improve young people services and hear their opinions. And I'll go into it more maybe later if you want to. But it has massively been the driver because of my experiences. So I really struggled when probably when when would it have been? Probably I was 15, 16. And I was really low, and very low all the time. Didn't want to get out of bed. Sleeping a lot, and depressed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know any other word. They use depressed, don't you? Use low mood.
Yeah.
But I knew I didn't want to do anything in the day. I got no joy in anything, and I left. And so I did my first year of sixth. The irony is, so in year 12, fine, got my AS levels, and then we at the time at school we had head boy and head girl, and I got selected to be head boy. I was like, oh, thank you so much. People say it was because my dad was the teacher. It was voted on by the students. If anyone else, but then I was off for 3 months. They're like, who is this head boy? Like, he doesn't
Mysterious
exist.
head boy.
It's just a figure though, and. So I was off for 3 months, about 3 months, 2.5, 3 months, when I was in sixth form, and just suicidal.
Yeah.
Didn't want to live anymore. Didn't find any joy in anything, like I said, and didn't really know how. And the thought of kind of university or what the next steps were, I was like, I didn't want to go downstairs to make a cup of tea. Like, never mind think about what was next.
Yeah.
And I remember my godfather talking to me. It was probably in the January, just before getting into like the last sort of term of school and stuff. And he was like, "You don't have to sit your exams this year, you know." And him saying that, I kind of like flopped on the floor and then kind of allowed myself just to be sad and be ill and take time off school. So I think I just tried to carry on whilst for that long.
You'd suppressed it a bit, had you?
Completely.
Because of the pressure of school, do you think?
I think part of it was pressure at school. I think it affected it. But I also, I come from, like, both my mum and dad are teachers. Yeah. We don't have, like, money issues as such. We don't have anything going on in the house, which I was like, there's nothing kind of trauma. There's nothing like, and so I think that was why I was getting so pissed off. It's like, there is nothing. Why am I so sad? There is nothing the matter.
You were looking for a reason for it and blaming yourself for not having one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So took time off school. This is very early days. So like, and fast forward 8 years, 8 years, 7 years, 8. Oh, I don't even know. I'm 25. 9 years. Crap. And I've gone probably through about 7 different bouts of counselling and done, and I still to this day, like you will have heard on the podcast, I still say I struggle with my mental health every single day. Yeah. But it's how I mitigate them things on a daily basis. So it's good days and there's bad days, and how in which we get through that, how we manage it, well, it depends on the person.
Yeah. I think that's what you do really well in the podcast as well, is let people talk about what's worked for them, because like it's not going to be the same for everyone. You talk about making jam.
Oh, classic.
Can we talk jam?
We can talk jam.
It's great though, because it makes everything so relatable, because it can be so simple.
Yeah. Well, I was doing a workshop in York High. One of the kids went, "Oh, you're the jam guy, aren't you?" I was like, "Oh, yeah."
Big compliment.
Yeah, to be fair. I was like, yeah, it could be a lot worse. So the jam, I can't advocate for it enough. Well, you've got to find the thing that helps you, and you've got to find the thing that sometimes pulls you out of bed on a morning, whether that be going to have a shower, or that cup of tea, or that morning walk. for me, it was baking jam.
Yeah.
Almost like religiously making jam, going to the Sainsbury's, picking up punnets of strawberries, coming home, making jam. And it gave me a purpose. Don't know why it helped, but I do know why it helped. It gave me a purpose. It gave me something to do that was not just lying in bed watching Sons of Anarchy on repeat.
Yeah.
And
was there like the mindfulness of it, like the ritual of it important, do you think?
And I think so, because I wasn't critical of myself when I was making the jam, because I was like, this is the first time I've ever made jam. I wasn't trying to improve the jam. I wasn't trying to. I was just doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it was somebody on the podcast talks about peeling potatoes, and it was just that kind of method, and you're just doing it, and you go over and over and over, and it makes you think about something different. If you're focusing on, even if it's something so simple, like jam's not that hard to make.
Yeah.
It's sugar and fruit. Like, cut it up, put it in the pan, boil it, pretty much. And so jam became the thing which really helped me. And after a certain amount of time, I've structured things around doing that. And then I don't make jam now. I think my mum and dad would be like, Chris, are you okay? If I started making jam again, what's going on? No,
jam's taken on new meaning.
Yeah, but it was the one thing that kind of dragged me out of a bit of a hole, but for no other reason. Well, I think on top of medication, counselling, and everything else, but it was the thing that helped me massively at the time, and I talk about it quite a lot. And so I just giggle at myself. It's like, did I actually do that? It's almost become a bit of a parody to myself. It's like, did I do that? But yeah, so that's one thing that massively did help me at the time.
Thank you, mate. And you mentioned there a little bit that you're critical of yourself. Was that when you're in sort of a low mood, when you're in that state? Do you find that you are critical of yourself? Is that something that's synonymous with the way that you're feeling?
I think I'm quite critical of myself all the time.
Yeah.
I think when I'm more tired, I'm more critical. When I've maybe drank too much alcohol, more critical. When I'm not doing the other things in my life that help me, I become. It's that self-deprecation of like, and you get into a bit of a spiral, don't you? Of, I don't feel nice, so I don't look nice, so then and then by the end of it, the spirals, I'm a bad person and everyone hates me, and it's like, and that happens. But I think it's sometimes just cutting it off before, and I am critical. But I think there's an element of I'm critical of myself because even with like around work and stuff, because I want to do the best I can.
Yeah.
And that in maybe like a pinch of like in a little small amount is really, really good.
Yeah.
But it's when you go past that mark, isn't it? And it's like, why am I being critical to myself? Like, am I doing it because I'm just being mean to myself? Yeah. I'm just being too judgmental of, I don't know, the way I look or who I am? Or is it because I'm actually trying to develop who I am as a person? I think it's just that subtlety, isn't it? Like
a slight change of mindset at the time. Like, I was talking to someone about anxiety, and sort of they're like, it is there to protect you overall. Like, it's just that it can run away with itself if not given adequate time and attention.
I think if we didn't ever challenge ourselves or be critical of ourselves, I think we'd all turn into narcissistic, arrogant.
Yeah.
And
the self-critic can limit you putting yourself out there, though, can't it?
Yeah.
I've found it, if you doing something like this, and I don't know how you feel about it on yours, but on a bad day, it can be like, well, that was terrible. I let that person down. I didn't ask the right questions. What if their story's not been done justice? And you get into that spiral about the thing that you're working on as well.
Yeah, I think there's an element. Here's a question. Do you find it weird listening to your voice back?
I did at first.
Do you now have
very nasal and high pitched? And it's weird, isn't it? You don't hear yourself until you listen to yourself on record. It's like, oh god, does everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
I found like when I now disassociate myself from that voice. Like, I'm just editing a podcast.
Yeah. Who's this guy?
I'm just editing the host of the podcast, and that's who it is. It's not me. It's definitely not me. And then the odd thing I'll say is, I'm like, Chris, why the You say that
Delete.
was,
Can I find a way to get that
yeah. Can I kind of tag that onto the end of somewhere else and get rid? But yeah, I think it's all in that kind of that balance, isn't it? You don't want to be so critical of yourself that you end up spiraling about things that you don't need to be critical about yourself. But there's an element of self-improvement, but not so much this Instagram level of what is it? An influencer said that everyone has the same 24 hours in the day.
Oh,
joke.
I hate that.
It's stupid.
It's just not fair, is it?
It's not true.
Right. Not everyone has the same resources or capacity.
No.
Different strokes for different folks, and hearing some of the different ways that people have not necessarily come out of it, because I think you hit the nail on the head. Is these things aren't necessarily about an end, a solution. I think for a while I gave myself grief whenever I felt my anxiety again. Like, no, I sorted you out, and you're back, and it's like then you're fighting it again, aren't you? Then it's like actually about sort of knowing what works to bring you into a better mindset, and accepting that you might feel anxious now and again, or that these things are a part of who you are, and that's all right.
It's when somebody said to me, "Is like, is it affecting your everyday life, and is it stopping doing the things that you would like to do?" Yeah. That's when it's like, blooming heck, you're gonna feel anxious if you stood in front of 200 people talking. Yeah, like we're allowed to feel anxious. We're allowed to feel sad. These are real human emotions. Yeah, I don't think it'd be okay if we didn't feel sad or anxious sometimes, because sometimes within that kind of, I think sometimes out of the worst of situations become sometimes your best stuff. So, and that's kind of linking it back to kind of why I do what I do, is because, okay, I struggled and I was really low, and I'd never want anyone to go through it. Absolutely not. But I don't think if I hadn't gone through what I did, I'd be doing what I do now. Yeah. But it's sometimes like, what's that phrase? What's that classic? Lemonade. I don't know.
It's life
you
gives
can cut this out, whatever.
Life gives you lemons.
Yeah, but it's that. So, how can you make a best out of a bad situation in some respects? Yeah. But I do agree with that in some respects. But it's also just like sometimes you're gonna have bad days. Yeah. What can you do on that bad day, just for that small 10 seconds, that makes it slightly less bad day? Yeah, baby steps. I mean, for you to experience what you did at such a young age, I suppose you haven't got the insight and the wisdom of experience to be able to do that then, presumably. Must have been a period of time where it was like, what is this and why me? And not having the tools to kind of know how to bring yourself out of it. But I think in some respects as well, I was very lucky to deal with it when I did. Yeah. Because I think it gives a different perspective on both the world, but also being thankful for different things. And at the time, I had support structures in place. I had school, I had my family, I had a wider network of friends than I do now. And because obviously it's different, but I think when you are so young and you don't wish it on anyone. But I learned a lot from that period of time. Yeah. And wow, I don't. I'm never going to ask someone, when do you want your bout of depression to come?
Yeah, but it's an interesting perspective, and it's a fair point that you were able to access support. Did you feel empowered to be able to speak? Have you always been so good at articulating what it is that is going on in your mind? No, terrible. That's I didn't tell my parents. So when I first started struggling, I reached out to a teacher I didn't know at the school, and was trying to be as completely adamant as possible that I'm not going to hurt myself. I'm completely fine, but I'm really struggling. Don't tell my parents. Don't. And I didn't want them to know, even though my parents are very, very supportive. Yeah. And it was, and the irony is now that I do a podcast where I talk about my mental health and other people's mental health on it, every week, and I work for a mental health charity, I talk about it all the way every week. I'm still bad at talking about my mental health. Right. So do you feel like you are? You mean, or you just it's kind of difficult for you, is it?
I think going back to the way that I disassociate myself from listening to myself in the podcast, I
Right.
disassociate myself from the work that I do and feel there's a more important element to it than,
Right.
and so I have to separate myself from it and go, which is sometimes probably not completely healthy, and that element of being present, you're not completely there. But I think sometimes for me, my girlfriend will know this the best. Hi, Moana. I have to be in the right frame of mind to talk,
Right.
and I've also almost got to, got to have the right situation.
Yeah.
And it's like lack of, and not being rushed into it, and it's got to be ready for it at the time when it's the right moment.
Right. Whereas actually sometimes it's like 10 a.m. You've got a podcast and you know you're going to be talking about it. That's like not always the right time, I guess. Is it? Is it hard for you to do the podcast sometimes? Would you say?
Yeah, like we said, said to you earlier, like the episode that comes out next week, is it this week? Monday this week. Oh, I need to edit that tomorrow. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? Podcast goes out on Wednesday, still need to edit it, so that's going to be fun. Some days, and I think you'll probably feel it the same as well, you've got to put on a persona, and it's that masking, isn't it? Like, I've got to be a podcast host today because ultimately this is about somebody else's story. And that's why I think sometimes the check-in like we do is good, because it kind of lays it out to people. It's like, do you know what, I'm struggling, that's okay. I can still function, I can still do my job, I can still go play cricket, but today's just not as good as some other days, and that's fine as well. So it is sometimes hard. It is harder because obviously your work with mindfulness and stuff, sometimes you might be at a support group or at an event, and if you've had a really, really hard day, it might be the best place in the world to be, but also might not be the right place for you to be as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I'll be like, right, there's the talking group tonight, but I haven't got the emotional capacity to go and be what someone else needs. And, you know, that's, like you say, that's all right. Have you always felt that because I'm always interested in how that relationship with people's parents. I've got a daughter now and she's literally started talking, and I want to show up right for her despite the fact that I struggle some days. And, you know, I just wonder where that comes from, that ability to go, it's all right. Like, what made you decide to talk to that teacher? What do you think changed for you that made you go, I recognise I need some support at this point?
So I was in a politics lesson with my dad. My dad was my teacher. And I walked out of the politics lesson straight into this other teacher's office. And so, no, it wasn't. I joke. I'd say it was all you done. It was an awful lesson. Didn't want to be there. No, it wasn't. It wasn't that at all. I think sometimes that analogy of the stress bucket becomes too much. And I think when you're trying to hold on so much in your brain at the time, and sometimes you're holding on to loads of things in your brain, you're like, why am I not being able to cope? And sometimes you just feel sad. And so what I wouldn't have said there was any sort of complete trigger to what happened. I would have said I'd struggled for years before, but just ignored it and ignored it and ignored it and ignored it. And one day and then started talking about it. And arguably, as I started talking about it, it was like floodgates open.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? When you say we need to go like speak out about our mental health, or and that's it's good and it's important. Yeah. And I think it is. Of course it is. I wouldn't do the job I do, but I think sometimes when you open them floodgates, it can be quite overwhelming at first, because you're like, oh my gosh, this is something I need to deal with. Yeah. And I probably after that first conversation went down further and further, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually. But it's just recognising sometimes that how much you are struggling
and how much you've held on to, and you finally sort of trying to let some of it go.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that everyone goes down before goes back up, but I think it's important to recognise that being weak in terms of how people of the society perceives that kind of way is fine. Yeah. And sometimes you can drop off because I don't know, you can go back up. I don't know, that wasn't very eloquent, but to go back up again.
Yeah. progress is not always linear.
No.
It's like it sometimes means you need to take a step back or out. I mean, because I get bad FOMO. I did for some reason, even though I'm not what I guess society would say is the most masculine of men, I still had that feeling of, no, you need to be the strong guy, you've got, responsibilities, and so you kind of get wrapped up in all of those personas that you're
100%.
expected to wear. And like you say, yeah, for me it was the first conversation proper was to IAPT to the woman on the phone, and it was like, oh, and it started coming out. I was like, oh, I got emotional at hearing myself actually say it, and then it was like they must get some intense phone calls on that phone line, because you can self-refer, you don't have to go through your GP, so they're getting the first, in some cases, sort of opening up that someone's done.
I think you can feel like sad for so long, or you can feel anxious for so long, and you can bottle it up and you feel it in your head, and it's so big in your head, but then the first time then you say it out loud, you go, oh my gosh, it's real. It wasn't just in my head. It is. And so I think sometimes that's the hardest bit. Yeah. But then it's going, right, you've accepted it. That's good.
It's a big first step.
That's massive. Yeah. But then it's also, it's about how do we have them baby steps after that big first step.
And what were they for you, if you don't mind me asking?
Making jam.
Yeah. Like, what took you from those conversations to working on yourself? And you mentioned maybe there was some therapy, was there?
So yeah, I went through camps when it was up in Lime Trees.
Right, yeah.
And I was there, and and so it helped when it was on medication, went on to different medications. That was a bit of a route for a while and didn't really know. As I've talked with a couple of other people, I think you look back at it and go, was that really happening? And I think, was I that low? And then you see parts of myself today, I'm like, oh yeah, I was that low. So I went through different counsellors and different wellbeing practitioners through CAMS, and I think it was quite prominent at my school at the time. We just lost a lad called Tristan to suicide, and that was very, very close to the time I was struggling, and it was all just a bit like, oh my gosh, this is all happening within at the similar time. And so I had lots of different counsellors until I found one who I would say challenged me a lot more.
Right.
In terms of, I think there's different approaches, isn't there, to counselling. I'm not a counsellor. I don't have any degree from or any training in terms of being a counsellor.
Yeah.
But I think counsellors work in different ways, and I think at first I needed an arm around the shoulder and be like, yeah, it's going to be all right. But then after a certain period of time, after like being off school for a certain amount of time, I needed somebody to go, right, what's the next step? Let's go. And get into a bit more of a structure and go, let's go to the depth and work. Why we think that we talked a lot in like kind of metaphors in how I kind of understood my mental health. And I understood as my mental health as kind of, imagine being in the ocean and you're holding onto a balloon and there are loads of fish pulling you down. And all I was trying to do was gasp. And every time I was like, I grabbed hold of another balloon, it started pulling me back. A shark decided to pull me down further.
Right.
And it was almost that up and down constantly. And so that's how I always understood it, of like that pulling and throwing from, I'm trying my hardest to actually sometimes going under is okay.
Yeah.
And so, but then as the counsellor was talking to me, it's like, right, we need to get you out and doing something different, because you've had the time now. Yeah. You've had a certain amount of time and you've come to terms with it, and it's like, what's next? How can we get you phased back into school? How can we get you back into doing things? Because I think sometimes low pits of depression in a strange way can become very, very comfortable.
Right.
And I think you can get very, very used. In the same way that routine is good for everyone, that routine of me just making jam and watching Sons of Anarchy was a very, very comfortable routine. And sometimes you've got to challenge yourself to get out of it.
Yeah. So actually, you need to then break out of your comfort zone. And so, was it like goal setting and accountability? Like, were you? I'm guessing you were a major part of making a plan for reintegrating. Then, were you, and going back to school? And
Yeah, it was. And so in the idea, so I went back to school just before my my A2 exams, and as with school, we decided I wouldn't sit all my A levels that year.
Right.
I would just try and sit politics.
right.
Having your dad as a politics teacher
Yeah.
does help that.
Yeah.
So managed to sit my politics A level that year, and then the year after, I did my maths and my philosophy. So I kind of broke it up into kind of a 3 years. And so that was kind of good for me because it was a little bit less pressure on you need to do all this at once. But I always had the goal that I wanted to go to university and do politics or philosophy, and I always wanted to do that. So that was always probably in the back of my mind that I was like,
You didn't give up on any of those aspirations. It was always.
I gave up on everything. I gave up on everything on my lowest points.
Yeah.
But I think once I'd started to kind of come out of that really, really low place, I was like, there was little things that I was like, okay, oh, maybe in the future. Oh, okay. I was chatting to someone the other day, and it's the first time you laugh, and you're like, why am I laughing? I'm depressed. Like, and you feel bad for it, and you're like, why am I feeling bad for laughing? Like, but then you think back, and then I remember thinking back to myself, I was like, I'm laughing at something. I was like, I'm still ill though.
Oh, mate.
And it's a weird one.
Wow.
And I think that's where we go back to that self-critical. It's like, how can we be we don't need to be that self-critical of ourselves, because how we approach things and how we get through the day changes from day to day. Never mind like when you're in them low phases. I don't know, I'm proper waffling.
No, listen, I was hoping for this, because normally you're not the one taking the time to really talk through it. But I've heard bits of your story, and it's fascinating, mate, and really interesting to get an insight into that time. And it's to hear how you can be so familiar with that low point that you almost give yourself a hard time for coming out of that. Like, that's fascinating, and I'm so sorry you went through it.
But but like we were saying before, I don't think I'd be doing what I do now if I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I think everyone says I would have followed in my mum and dad's footsteps and become a teacher.
Had you had enough of the education system with 2 teachers and
all family friends are teachers. My sister's a teacher. I was like, no, I'm not being a teacher. I'm going to do something else.
Politics, though, even more stressful, I would have thought.
I was going to say.
It's probably not a lot more stressful than a teacher, but...
Let's go the other way.
Yeah.
But like I said, I don't think I'd be doing what I do today and have the perspective that I do without that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't struggle.
No, I think you said something really interesting as well. You said earlier on, that you can still do your job and feel okay about, and be all right about struggling. And I could imagine in the workplace that you're in, that's, runs through it. I can only imagine. But I know from people I've spoken to in the group that there's quite a lot of anxiety about being honest to your employers because of the fear of like not getting a promotion, because there might be some worry about some time off somewhere down the line, or just that kind of like hesitancy to honour your own truth because of fear of what that might mean.
Like I think it always winds that kind of like in workplace environment where people worry about that, and it's completely legitimate worry, don't get me wrong, but I think we position ourselves as, well, I don't think we position ourselves, I think a lot of kind of the way politics works is mental health is seen as a burden on society, and it's seen as something that costs a lot, and it's a thing that like affects everyone, but actually NHS is under a lot of stress, so don't talk about your mental health. Or you do talk about your mental health, but There's no support for you.
They're always the stats, aren't they? Like however many billions of pounds a year are lost to mental health, rather than but how many people are showing up despite feeling.
And yeah, it's a really weird one, because it's like, do you know what? You look after your employees.
Yeah.
You tell them that it's okay to have a day off if you're feeling awful and because of your mental state. Bum heck. What I worked with. He's left now, but I remember chatting to him on one day, and I wasn't very productive. I'm scatty as hell at work, and I'll be like, let's do this, let's do that, let's do that, let's do that, and then I'll be like, oh, what's going on now? And I'll just be all over the place at times, and I'll bounce off the walls. But then on some days, I'll just be like, right, I need to get this done, and I'll be like, going back to being self-critical. Be self-critical if I don't get certain things done.
Yeah.
And I remember chatting to him in the office about it, and he was like, "You've done what you can do today, and that's all right. You've turned up. You've been here. You've done it. Yeah, it may not be your most productive day, but it's what you've been able to do today."
Yeah.
And that hit me. I was like, that's true, because actually the day before I did loads.
Yeah.
The day after I had loads of meetings booked in, so I knew I was going to do
it's all right.
There's such this kind of misconception, isn't there, that it's like growth. We all need to grow as people. We don't work like that. I don't think. Not in my head. I think we go in ebbs and flows, and some days. Why does seasonal affective disorder exist?
Yeah, and it seems very prevalent, doesn't it?
Because in summer people genuinely feel happier.
Yeah.
It
makes sense.
And so I think that goes down to even on a daily level as well.
We can set ourselves to-do lists and then berate ourselves for not doing them, rather than looking at whether or not it was a reasonable to-do list in the first place. Yeah,
completely. And so I don't know. I can't remember what I was saying now. I was going.
Well, it's because I cut you off. I've said I won't cut him off.
No, I do it all the time. I always feel so bad when I do it. I'm like, crap, I'm so sorry.
This floor, God damn it.
Where were we?
Yeah. Well, one thing I was going to say cut you off.
No, go on.
Was where I work. There was an initial hesitancy. I think they were very, very careful to look after us over COVID. But I think that what I think happened was they allowed working from home because of COVID, and recognised that actually people do work, the job does get done, and that I think maybe prior to that there might have been some hesitancy in having working from home days, because are people that productive if you leave them to their own devices? Will people show up and do the work and start on time and get the stuff, get through the work? But actually they've absolutely committed to it now, and most people are working from home, and the work still gets done. It maybe doesn't get done at exactly the same time of day, or like you say, you might have an ebb and a flow, but overall I think maybe giving people a bit more autonomy is helping, a bit more flexibility around.
Do you like working from home?
I do, actually. I mean, I have my own reasons for that. Had a baby in the middle of lockdown, so being at home and being flexible and being able to see the things that was happening there. And even now, like if Anna doesn't get home in time, I'm here, I can go and get Luna. So there are benefits from that around flexibility. But I've got quite a good support network outside of work, whereas I can imagine for some it's probably a lot more isolating.
I'm a bit on the fence with actually working from home. I don't know if this is probably me putting my own opinion on it, but I don't really like working from home at all.
Yeah,
I've never liked it. Even when I was at school, I did like my homework in the library. From university, I never worked from home. I would be all ends in the library, and then even now, I'll go most days into the office because.
Is there not? There's an option for working from home, is there?
Yeah, so I think it's like half and half we meant to do. And so, but then I work most of the time in the office because, shock, I'm an extrovert. Like that. That's probably if that hasn't come across on the podcast, I don't know. But I think there is brilliant benefits from working from home. Like you said, that flexibility, that sort of being able to do certain things, be able to sit in your pants and do it, go on a meeting if you want to. But I also think there might be a bit of, not a rebellion to it, but I think there might be a phase where we go back into more people working from the office, because we do miss, you don't get the same, like if we were doing this over Zoom.
Yeah, it's not the same.
You don't kind of get that human connection as much.
I couldn't agree more. Do you bounce off your colleagues and stuff then? Is it
quite
a
100%
active office with people chatting and...
Yeah, I'm probably...
People like, shut up, Chris.
Yeah,
Try
probably.
to do some work.
Yeah, probably. No, I like it because I think because of my job in itself, I want to know different aspects of what's going on in York and different elements of, oh, okay, does anybody know anyone from X organisation? And I may be able to do that over Teams and be like, message the appropriate person. But then I could just go, James, have you been over there recently?
Yeah.
Have you spoken to him? Cool.
Yeah.
Sound. What's the name? Oh, right. Cool. I'll bring him.
Yeah.
And even them sort of like micro kind of conversations, I think are really, really good for us.
Yeah.
Because it's give and take very quickly, and it's not formalised. It's just natural, and it opens up doors. And I think it's more particularly because I spend my life trying to chat to a range of organisations in York.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a fair point, and I wonder if there's research going on about the impact on, the general impact on it, because I've got a not always pleasant job, and so the one thing I think we do miss is that being able to turn around and be like, oh my god, that conversation was awful, and kind of like people being like, oh, I'm really sorry, like tell me about it, and then you've got it off you. Instead you internalise that, and I don't know over time whether that has an impact or not.
I think especially because we do like a lot of counselling, a lot of one-to-one support, like somebody comes out of a session which might have been quite difficult for the counsellors, because they're human too, and they go, are you all right? Yeah, just a hard session. Don't have to go into any details, but it's just somebody to go, cup of tea, do you want to go for a walk? And it's just them little things that I think,
even knowing someone cares a bit,
knowing someone's in the building, and I just think there is an maybe that's more because we work in quite a high sensitivity sort of like in terms of it's emotive topics. People are going to get upset sometimes, and that's going to happen. And so maybe that's more prevalent in that. But I still think there's elements of, like, if you walk into an office, you've said hello to somebody at the front desk. Yeah. You go past me. Oh, you bumped. Are you all right? Yeah. Timmy, you all right? Yeah. I use Tim as always an example of anyone.
I use Jimmy actually.
Timmy and Jimmy.
Some random person.
Yeah.
Jimmy.
And then you sit at your desk, and who's next to you? You all right? You doing okay? Yeah. Some people may feel that these might be superficial interactions, but I think they're all interactions that are beneficial to us at times.
Yeah, and they've completely gone if you're not there. Yeah. That's really interesting, mate. And I wonder if we've got a little bit of an insight there as to what it is that you do, because the podcast is just one slither of a what did you call yourself? Sorry, not what you call yourself.
Well,
what you are called a systems change lead.
That looks like it's come straight off LinkedIn, doesn't it?
It's a proper job title, man. So what other stuff might you? Yeah, by all means.
Sorry, I didn't wait.
Just to pause. So yeah, are you happy to tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do for Mind?
I definitely didn't just say this already and need to go to the toilet. Nice.
Don't ruin the illusion for everyone.
I realise I do that so much on the podcast. I'm just like, oh, the doorbell's gone.
Yeah.
Oh.
Love it.
And then I throw this, and then I throw myself off.
And I'm leaving this in as well, just because.
Oh, absolutely, mate. Always keep this. This is the goal. This is what people want. Well, I don't know if you're listening. You don't want this. I'm sorry. It's kept in now. What do I do? So I love my role because of how varied it is. So on a given day, so obviously the podcast, which entails getting the guests, recording, editing, social media for it, all that stuff. That's one hat. You've got, I'll save your mind till last, but then I work with kind of a load of different organisations in York. So basically this project, which was called the Systems Change Project as such, was the idea of we go and ask young people and stakeholders, what would you like to change about the system, like I said earlier. And so I do, right, so co-production, massive buzzword across the board. It's like co-production in its like real form is if you're setting like a survey or something, young people are setting the questions with you.
Okay.
It's not just like having a survey.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of workshops in the beginning with young people to basically go, right, what do you want? Okay, you want a single point of access for all mental health services across the city. Okay, that's what you want. Right, let's now design the website together. So part of my role is Your Mind. So Your Mind was created as, I hate the word signposting because I think it's a little bit more than that. Because signposting, I get wound up at because it sometimes doesn't. I know if in my depths of feeling crap, if someone said, go to mindfulness, I'd have been like, sod off. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of Your Mind is that we try and give it a kind of a friendly face and have kind of handhold young people through the process of getting support. Whether that be, do you know what? You need to get access, you want to get access to a youth club or something activity purpose-based. Brilliant. Okay, you might be smoking a bit too much weed.
Yeah.
Here's Changing Lives example. That's where you get some drug and alcohol use support. And then you've got the mental health services as such as well. So you've got like CAMS on there, you've got York Mind, you've got IAPT. And the whole idea of the website is that it's like, what do all these services offer? What is their support? How do you access it? Where is it? What does even the front door look like? So
and all that information is on your site instead of them having to go off elsewhere.
And
so
you can. We still link to the other sites,
yeah.
From what young people say, it's like we don't want to go on a website and the information be wrong and us not to trust it, and it's hard enough as it is to access support. So just be honest with us. And I was like, okay. So so we've got about 50 organisations on Your Mind currently, of which mindfulness do feature. And the idea is every 6 weeks I send out a email to all these organisations, like, please just send me updates. Young people have asked us to keep it up to date every 6 weeks. We were doing it monthly originally, but it's a little bit too quick. Things don't change that quickly. But every 6 weeks we try and update Your Mind so that young people know what's the referral process. What's the waiting time? Is it open? Are we open to referrals? And quite heartbreaking. Like, one of the young people says, like, I know I'm on a waiting list. I know I am. I just want to know how long it's going to be. I was like, I don't mind waiting. I just don't. I want to know how long I'm waiting. I don't want to be messed about.
Yeah, that's.
Really I want to be communicated with.
Yeah.
So I try and work with these organisations to go in, and I know Door 84 is a good example of go in. Just get involved in their youth session or get involved in whatever they're doing on the day, chat to them a bit about mental health and be kind of visible to them, and then go, oh, what else would you like in terms of mental health support? Not kind of like forcing it on them, but play some football with them first.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of that stuff, and then
you're getting more of an honest response because it's not a survey, it's you being there chatting to them.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
So they're like,
job.
Huh?
What a cool job.
Yeah, I love it. So I do that. I think my girlfriend, okay, be so proud of you. Be so proud of yourself of what you're doing. Because you are doing it now on my own and stuff. I used to have Elizabeth who was on the project as well. She's not there anymore. But she's like, you are doing a lot to say do one person. And so I think you just have to remember that sometimes, because I went into the job going, right, if this can help one person, that is it.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. If one person is benefit, amazing. And then it's another person, and then another, and then another. And I think it's just trying to improve that access and understanding to young people about what support's available with them.
Yeah.
And if it isn't available,
be honest.
Say it. Don't make them jump through hoops.
I think certainly my organisation, it can be difficult to say, I'm sorry, we can't offer that anymore. People do have a reluctance to say, we're not going to be able to support you with that now. And And I think it's hard, to be honest, about stuff like that, isn't it?
And at times it is difficult because I'm like, this isn't. Obviously, there's 50 organisations. Not all of them are mental health services.
Yeah.
All have some specific niches. Some are just support activities or sports clubs, and it's the whole idea of it's like, what else can you do to give yourself purpose or give yourself some sort of like almost self-help whilst you might be on a waiting list, because it is a hard, long road for a lot of young people. But let's just be honest about that. But I do get sometimes downhearted. Sometimes I'm like, nothing's open. Like, what?
I bet that's really hard for you as well. As you do help more people and as you see this grow, that there must be a bit of pressure on you, is there, to kind of show up and do, you're doing an amazing work, but with that must feel quite a bit of responsibility.
I think at times yes, but I think I can't control where the money from different places go, or what services exist. I can't do that. All I can do is try and work with organisations, show what's available, show how to access it, and then if it's not available, what else can you do? Okay, you can go listen to the Mindfulness podcast. They've got good experiences on there. Might be able to resonate with 1%. We've got other national services on the website which we explain. We've got a coping mechanism section on the website which is basically says why sensory strategies work, why different elements of the
That's cool.
Like why being active work. Explain why these things help, because sometimes understanding the why of why things help is really important to then doing it. Like, I don't know, why do we cross at a zebra crossing? Because the cars know that they need to stop if you're at the zebra crossing. We don't just cross in the middle of the street because the car doesn't know you're going to do it. Like, why am I going to have a cup of tea on an evening? Because it's warm, I can taste the tea, it's a routine, it feels homely, and
it's getting your regime for well-being in place. Everyone deserves one.
Absolutely. So it's just, how can we help young people to understand what support is out there? And within that becomes talks and assemblies, which was weird going, which is
nerve-wracking. Is it more or less nerve-wracking that they're young people? I mean, I know you're a young person yourself, but there comes a point, I guess, when you leave school, like the idea of standing up in my old school in front of a lot of kids. Nope.
I'm trying to think. I think I say when I'm doing a talk in front of, say, I don't know, 100 adults, I'll go, you lot are well more scarier than adults. Well more scary than going into an assembly. And then when I go into an assembly, I go, you lot are well less scary than loads of adults. Do you know what was weird? It was weird going back to my old school. That was the hardest to do.
I bet.
Because I don't want to just do like an assembly. Like, I don't want to stand at the front. I got employed to be as a young person. So they joke that arguably I'm not a young person in 2 months because I'm 26. But
you don't want to be called Mr. Klays when you go in.
Oh no. Whenever they say sir, I'm like, no, I'm Chris. Don't call me sir. And I make a point of always trying to, if there's a stage, I sit cross-legged on the stage and or lie down on the stage.
Try to make yourself look as approachable as possible.
And they're just like, who the hell is this guy? What's he doing?
You're taking it too far.
And then there's just a picture of a pigeon on the screen, and they're like, who is this dude?
This is the perfect time to talk about Chet.
Yeah, that wasn't actually that wasn't meant to be a little link in, but
no, because I did want to definitely bring him up at some point. Yeah, tell us about Chet and where he comes from and how he helps.
Chet the pigeon. Where did Chet the pigeon come from? Chet the pigeon was formulated after 2 pints in Spark with my girlfriend. No, we were talking about check-ins. Even though I said earlier I don't find it easy sometimes to speak out, I know that I can speak out. And for a lot of people, it's very hard to even vocalise the words, like we were saying. I feel shit, or I'm struggling with my mental health. That is well difficult. Even to the people you're close, but sometimes harder to the people you're closest to. So we're like, all right, how can we do something? And so the idea of the pigeon actually came initially from vegetables. Right, no, stick with me. At university, me and my friend Rob had the kind of a code, which was like, I'm really struggling, mate. And you send a picture of a vegetable to each other. And it was kind of a sign of, I kind of need you. I need to chat, or I need you in the room. I need you somewhere. And it wasn't anything more than that. And it was sometimes we just go and sit and chill and have a coffee, or we'd just play some Blur, or we'd just play some Xbox, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we're like, right, okay, vegetables don't really work. So we tried to think of something that was a little bit more something you see on a daily basis, because I think people always want to check in. I've just seen a pigeon. Genuinely just saw a pigeon. But how often you need to see something on the regular, just to remind yourself to check in with yourself, but also to check in with someone else. Not because that pigeon is going to help you in any way at all. Not that because the pigeon, but sometimes you need a little impetus to remind yourself to actually go, oh, actually, I've not heard from Sam in a while. I've not heard from Timmy or Jimmy. Let's send him a message. And that message doesn't have to be, how are you? That picture, you could just send them a picture of a pigeon and guaranteed they will respond. If they don't understand the pigeon, they'll respond with, why are you sending me a picture of a pigeon?
And then you're off.
And then you go, just wondering how you are. And they're like, oh, sound. If they do understand why you send you a picture of a pigeon, then they can almost go straight into it and go, do you know what? I'm feeling good today. And it just kind of breaks that initial barrier of saying, I feel rubbish. And the idea... My girlfriend was like, it can go viral. Check the pigeon can go viral. I was like, right, okay, I don't even know how things go viral, but it's just trying to break some of them barriers down of that first initial contact with somebody, or even with yourself, because it's just as important to check in with yourself to go, how am I doing? Am I spinning too many plates? Do I need to take something off the wagon? Do I need things like that? So that's where Chet came from.
I love it. It's such a good idea. I think we will adopt it indeed, because it is. And I mean, in York, there's pigeons everywhere. So it's like you say, it's always a good time to check in with yourself. And sometimes for blokes, it can be difficult to ask their friends, their male friends, are you all right, mate? And mean it. And, there's the Ask Twice campaign. There's the what did I like? Someone said, ask someone out of 10, because people are so used to being like, you all right, mate? Yeah, I'm all right. You all right? Yeah, I'm all right. If you ask someone out of 10, they have to give you a number, and then if it's low, you're off. But with this, it's just that reminder that, look, have you checked in on yourself for a bit? Have you checked in on your mates? And if not, there's always a good time.
I'm not saying every time you see a pigeon, message a new friend who you've not spoken to for.
Also, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? I love that you've just seen one while talking about Chet as well.
I know.
Brilliant. I was going to ask you, what sort of stuff do you do to kind of keep yourself well? I know, like I say, he pops in on a pretty nice bike.
Yeah.
You do a lot of cycling. Is that part of your regime? Like what?
That's out of necessity. I don't drive. Sort of support network. Yeah, unbelievable girlfriend. She's ace. Very supportive family. Also mint, and it's they're really kind of clued into mental health as well. So, mum was a primary school teacher, dad was a secondary school teacher, and very big advocates for mental health anyway. So they are, even though I think when me and my mum talked about it on the podcast, she was like, so much more different when it's your own offspring that's struggling now. But no, I've got good friends. I find it hard sometimes because a lot of my good close friends are down in London, and so went to Sheffield Uni. A lot of them are all sporadically over across the UK. But saying that, I've still got good friends in York. I play cricket in Heworth. Cricket's a massive one for me. I say that I'm absolutely terrible at cricket this season. I've forgotten how to play, so maybe it's not helping me at the moment. So things like being active is really important for me. So cycling everywhere, really good for me.
Yeah.
As my friend Harvey said to me once, a walk is criminally underrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go for a walk, and I'll take that one step further, and going a walk where out of York, because York is the flattest place in the world. Going out into just the peaks or the dales and just putting the phone away and just listening to things that isn't Instagram or a podcast or sorry if you listen to a podcast and this is your way to chill out. But it's things like that. I think when I really, really reset is when I go camping somewhere, and my favourite thing in the world to do is wake up on a morning and have my little stove on, making a coffee, like sun rising, and it's just like
you unplugged a little bit and just nature.
Just calm.
That's nice,
and I love it. I think one thing I would say is that I think it's really important that the way we manage depends on how you're feeling as well. So you can do different things to mitigate. So things like routine, brilliant for just kind of generally keeping yourself well and measured. But I know if I'm low, one thing that's really good for me is just stopping and going to sleep. Just have a nap. You're probably tired, Chris. Go and have a nap. Go to sleep. If I'm feeling anxious, go for a walk.
Okay.
Get yourself out of the situation. Go for a walk. If I'm feeling angry, go to the gym, throw some weights around, go for a run, do something a little bit more upbeat where you need to get some frustration out. Whereas a walk or going to sleep won't. And I think
dwell on those thoughts, right? So get the right thing for the feeling that you've got.
I think so. I think it's really important, because if you need distracting, podcasts are amazing. And it's transferable, isn't it? It's like if someone's really, really, really pissed off and like getting really angry about something, what did they used to do? They used to put them in solitary confinement and like in a straitjacket. No, that person needs to release energy. That person needs to like be out in nature and be and like sensory, not more confined to the situation. And
and I think that's a bit of an allegory to the way that we can get into our to-do lists. I know what I'm like. Like it's like the route out of overwhelm and burnout is not a bigger to-do list. Get that done and then everything will be okay. It's like, what is it? There's a quote that I'm gonna probably murder, but it was.
I think I've done that about 3 times already. I think I've misquoted about 4 people I know, and 3 famous people.
You're a podcaster. Just send me your little edits. We'll put them in. Well, I'll just overlay them. No one will know. It was something along the lines of, if you should. Yeah, this is it. I've got it. You should meditate for an hour a day unless you are busy, and then you should meditate for 2. Like that's the idea that like. If you're busy, you need more you time, you need more nature, you need more, and it's so easy to like let those things go because actually they're the things taking up your time. And
that burnout comes from the fact that you aren't probably being nice to yourself and doing the things that you enjoy. And you can have different burnout, can't you? You can burn the candle from both ends, and you can work really hard, and then you do too much, and then you realise I need to stop and just chill. But then also, like you said, sometimes you just need to stop and meditate if you are too busy and take more time for yourself. Like nobody's ever got better from burnout by working harder. No one's got more stuff done because
there's a bit of a culture of it though, isn't there? Especially on social media, this whole sort of productivity. And look, I like some of it, and some of it's good for certain times. But some of it also makes you kind of feel like, oh, the world is on like turbo mode and everyone's progressing, and so I've got to be on that train. And actually it's like disconnect sometimes. Hustle culture they call it, don't they?
It's some of it I find really interesting, and some of it I think is really, really beneficial, and if it works for you, it works for you. But I think sometimes what you do see on social media, I'm like, are you really doing that every day?
Yeah.
Are you really?
Are you pretending to do that to get the followers so that...
Because, like, come on.
Is that your Lambo?
Like 7 gyms in a week. Like, that's for a start. That's just not healthy in itself because you need a rest day.
Yeah.
But really, are you actually doing it? And I think because of the social media, we compare ourselves so much. It's why I like on the podcast social media, I just like...
You're very you.
I just literally chat shit on it.
But it's honest, and I think that does sometimes cut through all of the other stuff you see because there's not that much of it. and then it's like, oh yeah, well actually, we're all normal people. We're not really gonna. There's very few of these influencers that are actually flying around the world just to have photographs taken of themselves, and actually the rest of us have got to get up on Monday and do the job. So actually, is that what we really aspire to anyway?
Nah, absolutely. I
need less time on Instagram,
yeah,
not more.
take me away from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Take me away from Canva and making reels. Like, get me away. Like,
yeah.
There's a place for it, like we said. There's definitely a place for it, but also there's a place for a lot of other things that for yourself. It's probably better than a completely rigid routine. It's the same as that Instagrammer.
Yeah, allow some flexibility.
100%.
Nice, thank you, mate. Is there much else going on? I know there'll be loads going on because like York Mind seems to be everywhere, but it's lovely to hear about Your Mind. I know that they've got some other stuff going on. There's a workplace wellbeing knowledge hub, which I wanted to mention because there's, even though it feels more hopeful and the conversation around mental health seems to be going in the right direction, I think as well, like we alluded to a bit earlier, there's still some hesitancy around how to show up at work and be honest about your mental health, or how to support staff. I know we've got a lot of guys in Mindfulness who run businesses, how you can help the people who work for you when they're struggling. So it looked like quite a good
we touched on it a bit, didn't we, in terms of around that burnout and that work and that overload and that stress and what have you. But so, right, all I can see is Simon, who is kind of the lead on this.
If this isn't your remit,
no,
it's totally fine.
But it's good to talk about. So with York Mind, with York City Council, are doing, there's this thing called the Knowledge Hub, and then there's more kind of training for businesses and employers to try and improve organisations, how they manage and support their employees. So I think they're trying to gather loads of resources, and we do like loads of training, whether that be mental health first aid or specific to like employment and stuff. And so best place probably to go to our website and learn more about it. I don't know enough about it myself.
That's fair
probably
enough.
Should know more about it.
No, it sounds like a really useful resource. And Your Mind, again, you can link to that, can you, from
on York Mind's website. So Your Mind is kind of this. So even though Your Mind is kind of owned by York Mind, that is all different organisations in York who are part of it, whereas York Mind website in itself has a load of other stuff around kind of that knowledge hub and support for employees. One thing I'll massively shout out though, like Steph would kill me if I didn't. No, she wouldn't. But we've just done a young men's suicide prevention group, and they've created. There was part of it was two things. Like one was My Mind on a mural, and one was Active Minds. And the idea of it was like, how can we link talking about mental health for young men into activities and stuff like that? And it's just finished. It finished on Saturday. It was in Fabrication in York, and it was like a whole kind of graffiti art piece created by like a professional artist, like professional graffiti artist. I think it's touring around the LNER Stadium in Tadcaster and stuff, and that's all based on the piece of artwork that the young men in the group created, which are like, that's incredible. Honestly, it's an amazing piece of art.
We'll link people to that because that sounds incredible,
class.
Man.
It's so good. So I just want to shout that out. That was such a good piece of work.
That's awesome, man. So tell me what's next then for the Chit podcast. Have you got some guests lined up, and just anything else on the horizon for York Mind? So we are still in Pride Month. With my friend Rue, we've done an accidental Pride episode. It just came out by pure chance that they came on the podcast during Pride Month. But we talk about Rue's story and how they came out as trans and non-binary. So that comes out this week. But this probably a while ago. I was just that time warp of podcast editing and recording. So that will have just come out. We've got we've got two episodes that follow each other. One is with a girl who really struggled with OCD, and then the week after, 2 weeks after, her dad's on the podcast. So back to back, you'll hear
kind of the two perspectives on exactly the same story.
Wow.
So that's I need to edit
so
them as
cool.
well.
Yeah, that's so cool, man.
Yeah. So basically, I'm just kind of trying to come with a bit more of a catalogue of different stuff. So if people are more interested with like about OCD, brilliant. You can hear this episode, this episode, this episode, this episode. If you want to know about what counselling like, X person, Y person, Z person, talk about this. And just kind of create a little bit more so people can go, okay.
Yeah.
But with Chit in your mind, the whole principle of the whole project, it should never be static.
Yeah.
Like, things don't work if they stay in the same place or look the same or be the same for so long. They've got to be changing and evolving with what people require. So I'm hoping to put videos up on your mind to guide people through the website and go, I'm Chris, I'm one of the people that created this with young people. Here's what you can get to here.
Right, I see. Yeah.
So, and just try and develop it and change it based on what young people say.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing, because in a year, so the way I understand my mental health will be different to the way somebody who's 21 will understand theirs.
Yeah.
We can all resonate with different experiences, but no experience is exactly the same. So we've also got to keep adapting and changing what our offer is and changing what's available, so that people can feel like they can go to different elements of support. And that's
well, I like that you do that, because as well as lots of people's different experiences, each person gets a chance to tell their story, but also what worked for them, which I think is really, really useful. Have you found that there's been any sort of patterns that have emerged from the conversations that you had, or has there been any guests in particular that have kind of stopped you in your tracks, or how has the process been? I like you say it's evolving all the time, but has there been anything that's made you think, wow, I'm getting this right?
Every episode anyone's come in to record, I think, has been both a cathartic exercise for me and for the person telling their story. I think and if that isn't a metaphor for talking about your mental health anyway, the one that goes into the complete public domain for everyone to hear, I think it's hard. I think the first 10 minutes of any podcast, even if you went back and listened to any of the 34 episodes, the first 10 minutes is probably always the hardest sometimes to listen to, because you're like, oh, what? And people are nervous. And so everyone goes on it nervous. And in the same way, people are nervous to talk about their mental health. But most people at the end of it go, I'm glad I did it. Yeah. And the last question I always ask people is, what would you have liked to have known when you first started struggling? That's usually the kind of the final end point of the podcast. Without spoilers. No, I'm joking. But most people say that it's going to be okay. Yeah. Some people give specific advice that really help them, but I'd say a majority of people just go, it's bloody difficult, but it's going to be all right. And how we get there is individual, but I love doing the podcast. Not all the time, won't lie. Sometimes I'm like, don't want to listen to my own voice. Or I don't want to be cheery and go for it. But I guess that's the point of the check-in. It's like, no, I don't have to be. Yeah. So I've loved doing it, and it's really, and I guess you do as well.
Absolutely.
Like
you can tell as well, like you are yourself. You don't put podcast host Chris mask on, or if you do, it seems very honest and you, and I think that comes across, and I can imagine that makes your guests feel able to be themselves too,
And like I say, it's aimed at younger people, but anyone can find value in it. Like
absolutely,
like that's why I've got the parents episode, where I've got the services episode. Anyone can find value in it, but I'm not saying that you need to find value in all of it. Yeah. Find the bits, or like put in the description what it's about or what people touch on. Like if you want to have a look and have a listen and go, they are probably some of the weirdest titles you'll probably find in podcasts.
Titles are great, man. I think you've gone for it, but they all do. They're all related to the episode. You kind of know what you're getting, even though they're like, "Wow, how are they gonna get around to this bit?"
Yeah, I don't. What is? Yeah, what was it? Harvey psychotic depression and a sausage sandwich, I think was one. I was like, what? So it gives a flavour. Well,
Sausage.
yeah. But the descriptions do tell you more about what's
Yeah.
on the podcast.
Yes,
But
yeah.
no, that's. But like I said, most people come on it and go, it's hard struggling with mental health, but just one step at a time, and you do get through it.
Yeah, that's lovely, man. Thank you so much. And if people want to listen to it, what's the best place to do that? It's on all the platforms, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can get it on Spotify, get it on Apple, get it on Google, all them normal places. But then also there's a place on Your Mind as well where you can listen to it. And I'm hopefully going to categorise it in Your Mind a little bit better. But you can get all of them on Your Mind as well if you want to then follow the podcast into that's the part of the website that person was talking about. But that's on there as well.
That's lovely. Thank you. And please do go and give it a listen. It's brilliant. And I thank you for coming and giving us your time today and telling us all about it. I'm honoured. It's a privileged position to be, isn't
mate,
it?
thank you.
Hosting someone. So and you normally do such a good job of hosting, so I hope you found this experience.
No, it's been absolutely ace. So thank you ever so much for having me on.
Thank you, dude.
And I hope if you are listening, you found some value in it.
And listen, come back if you've got any more stuff going on. Like we're here for it, man, for sure.
Nice.
And we ask everybody for a song.
Yep.
And normally we ask for a happy song and a sad song, and you have broke the mold and given us one song for both happy and sad, I think, unless you've come with more. But certainly, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it. Are you happy to share?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, go for it. So what is your song today?
Okay, so this kind of links back to kind of my own story of my mental health. So the song is Nuvoli Bianchi by Ludovico Einaudi. And when I was struggling massively, sometimes I put on like Screamo and just wanted and then sometimes you'd put on anything. But at the time when I was struggling, we had a piano in my house, and I've always really liked classical music. I love classical and I love techno, both because they have like incremental changes and they develop and they evolve and they change, and it's like into a crescendo. It's built, And I love Ludovico Einaudi. And when I was struggling, I listened to The Islands, which is kind of like his compilation disc, and I listen to it a lot. It's on Spotify Wrapped. It's been in my top 5 songs for the last 7 years.
Right.
And it is the sad song because I listened to it a lot when I was sad, when I was low. But I also found a lot of comfort in it, and I found a lot. And even though it is somewhat quite emotive piece of music, I now look back at it now, and I started to teach myself from YouTube how to play this song.
Right.
And I'm not a musician. My sister's more musical than I am, but I'm not a musician. But when I was really struggling, that was probably one of the things that started getting me out of a bit of a hole, actually, trying to teach myself how to play this song because I loved it so much. And so even though it brings up feelings of emotion of like, whew, it also is something that I think is an amazing piece of music, and I think I look back and go, kind of wrapping it up around that sort of, not glad to have gone through it, but glad to understand where I am now because I went through it.
Yeah, it's part of the person you are today.
Yeah, and so it last, when would it have been? It was September last year. So I couldn't find tickets from anywhere apart from in Madrid. And so I booked tickets to go see Ludovico Einaudi in Madrid. And
wow.
I went to see it, and I was like, I was bawling.
Yeah,
I was
wow.
I was just like sat there on my own, just like. But then I was also like, this is amazing. This is my favourite piece of music ever, and
played by him in person in a different country.
Yeah,
must have been an amazing experience, man.
Yeah, so that would be my sad and happy song at the same time. So
thank you so much, man. You mentioned as well The Stranger by Albert Camus.
Albert Camus, yeah.
Camus.
That links to my my nerdy philosophical sort of sense of. I would like to think I'm a deep thinker. I think a lot about things, maybe too much.
Yeah.
But Albert Camus is a existentialist philosopher, and the idea of it is that in the book Le Stranger, it's written in French and it's called The Stranger or the Outsider. People translate it to, and this guy in the book. This doesn't ruin the book. But his mother dies, and he doesn't show emotion, and he doesn't. He goes to the funeral, doesn't cry, and everyone around him is like, "Why is this guy not crying?"
Yeah,
like this is weird. And the whole idea of kind of existentialism is that your path in life is decided by you, your purpose is decided by you, and how you feel is decided by you, and you are not bound by sort of any sort of outside. And you go through this book understanding Mersault's kind of journey, and I read this book when I was struggling, and it kind of resonated with me quite a lot, because I was like, I don't have to act in any particular way based on what people think I should be acting like. And it's how in the book people judge him based on his experiences of how he.
Why aren't you showing up how I think you should?
Yeah, wow. And it's a really interesting concept. If people got into existentialism, it's a bit weird, but it's also, once you get to kind of the depth of it, it's very, very freeing.
Yeah.
Some people go, "Oh, existentialist, there's no point to the world."
It sounds a bit like nihilism, but I suppose it's more not there's no point. It's just that the point is not derived from everybody else's opinions about the point. You're the point.
Yeah. You're here for no other purpose than the one you make of it.
Yeah.
And you can find that in your daily life, your job, your podcast, your cricket team. Could be anything.
Yeah.
And
the moment that you're in right now, the mindfulness of making jam.
Literally. And it can be absolutely anything you want to make of it. And at the time when I read that, and first time I read it, I didn't really understand it, and then started to understand it a bit more, and I was like, actually, this is just completely freeing in some respects.
Wow.
Don't live by it.
No. But you take the bits that you need from it when you need them, and that's I'm fascinated by that.
I really recommend reading it, but then after you read it about existentialism, because you can read it and be like, what the hell has gone on in this book? No,
it's not.
No. It's a bit weird.
Yeah,
it's not like 17th century philosophy, which is like, what the hell are these all talking about? It's a guy from the 20th century talking about. Yeah. So it is quite accessible.
Yeah, and it's alluding to existentialism rather than actively talking about it.
Yeah, it's a story. It's a story about this guy's life, but it's as a metaphor for existentialism and how to live your life.
I will read that. That sounds really interesting.
It's not long as well.
Thank you so much.
No.
This has been amazing, and long may the podcast continue, and if there's anything we can do to promote any of it, then just shout. But
same goes, man.
Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for your time, brother.
Thank you.
Take care, man. So come on then. What did you think of Chris? What an incredible bloke doing incredible work out there. Bloody good podcast as well. Please check it out. Chit podcast. Visit Your Mind for more info. Please engage with our podcast and get in touch if you've got something to say. Look after yourselves out there, and remember, keep talking.